Hi, everyone. It's us from the Map Center and the BPL back for another Thursday evening of trivia. I'm Garrett Nelson. I'm the curator of maps at the Leventhal Map and Education Center. To my left is Rachel Mead. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm the new public engagement and interpretation coordinator at the Map Center.
Yes, Rachel's a long-term intern of ours who we just promoted to a staff member, and this is her first week as a staff member at the Map Center. So we're super excited to have her here. And below Rachel and I is
I'm Megan Weeks. I am the curator of interpretation for Boston Public Library Special Collections. So Rachel, it's awesome to have another official interpretation title aboard the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've actually within the Map Center we have our education department, and then we have our department of everything else, which includes collection and interpretation. We've been trying to think of a cool acronym that uses like interpretations and research and collections and all the other things we do. So we're working on it. We're trying to smash as many letters together as possible.
It's as if NBLMEC with an ampersand isn't already enough. You guys are rocking the letter game.
So if you're just tuning in, we're going to wait for people to filter in the room and grab your popcorn and drinks or whatever cocktail weenies or whatever you would have if we were all together in the Newsfeed Cafe or at a Boston bar. We are not at a Boston bar. We're in our own homes, and you're in your own homes or wherever you tune into the internet. But we want to encourage you to have fun in whatever that means for you, in whatever quarantine setting you happen to be in right now. We're going to start with a little rundown of how trivia works and what the rules are and how to submit answers and what to expect. If you were with us last month at our first trivia event, you can skip that, or you can listen to us because we're funny and clever and just great to look at. And it'll probably take about 5 minutes, and then we'll start the actual round of questions a little after that. But if you're just doing it for the first time, you've never been here before, don't worry. We're going to get you set up with how it works and what to expect, and just how fun and challenging these trivia questions will be. So I'm going to share my screen if I can remember what I did with it. There it is. Okay, so throughout the event, you're going to see either me or Rachel or Meg or three of us or two of us or some combination, as well as the slides that are going to have the trivia questions and answers on them. This is our second time doing this remotely, so hopefully we're getting better and better at it every time. I know a lot of you, if you're returning, had a good time the first time. We've incorporated some of your suggestions into this round. We're going to allow for a little more time for questions this time. And we're going to be even funnier and more clever. Like, I didn't know it was possible, but we're ready to do that. The way this works is that you're all welcome to be on teams. The more brains, the more chance you have at winning and getting all the questions right. Unless you have one crazy, super-powered brain that knows everything or has cheated by bribing one of our employees to download the PDF ahead of time. But so you can have one person, you can have two people, you can have 20 or 50 or 100. You can have a Russian botnet of 1,000 people if you've set that up. But each team needs to make sure it only submits one question or one set of answers to each round. And the way you submit answers is at this URL. It's tinyurl.com/BPL-trivia-form. This QR code up here in the upper right should also take you there if you're the sort of person who scans QR codes. I've never done it, but should work. And we'll put that URL back up too after the first round when it's time to submit.
I feel like QR codes are back, Garrett, with the age of the QR code menu.
Yeah, I guess that's right. I guess now that everything has to be contactless, but we used to joke that we were gonna set up QR codes that would like have, whatever, like like our own bank accounts or something, because nobody would ever scan them. Like you see back in the 2000s, they're just like, oh, nobody ever scans these things. But yeah, I don't know, if you want to try to scan that QR code, go for it, and hopefully it goes to the right place. tinyurl.com/BPL trivia form. So that form is just like a really simple form with entry for your team name, the round, there's a drop down for which round it is, and then there's entry fields for the 5 questions. Each round has 5 questions. Each round you'll resubmit, or you'll refresh that page once and submit it at the end of the whole round. So we'll have a round of 5 questions. You'll answer the 5 questions with your team, you'll hit submit, and then you'll start again for the next round. So it's really important to make sure you keep your team name the same each round. If you don't, we won't know how to track you across the rounds. And each team, just make sure you pick one person to submit the questions. So if you're all in the same room, great, like one person can do this on their phone or their computer. If your team is across time zones or whatever, just make sure that you're figuring out how you're communicating with one another so that one person submits your answers. If you screw up, if you're like, you were on round 2 and you hit it and you're like, oh crap, I accidentally hit the submit button, just resubmit the whole thing over again at the end of the round. What we'll do is, if we get multiple submissions under the same team name for a single round, we'll score whichever the last set that you submit is. So this is like similar, like if you're at a trivia night with a piece of paper to submit answers, like this is the piece of paper basically. Last point, because we distinguish you by your team name, choose a weird, odd team name that nobody else will ever choose. Because if you choose something like map people or whatever, I don't know, like BPL lovers, everybody's going to be BPL lovers, and we won't know which BPL lovers you are. So choose something really weird, like your, I don't know, password to your Facebook account. I'm just kidding. Don't put your password in. But pick something weird that nobody else will choose. We can see this on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. So if you've got questions, let us know. We also have staff monitoring those comments too. So Rachel, Megan, anything else?
Ready to rock.
Cool. So the rules for trivia. First, don't cheat. We can't stop you from cheating. Of course, you could Google some of these questions. Don't do that. The way this trivia works is that we have 2 web tools, Atlascope and Digital Commonwealth, which are portals into our collections, and those are what you're supposed to be using to get these answers. So don't cheat. It's lame and makes it not fun for anyone. So we can't prevent you from doing it, but please don't. 2, we are the final arbiters of your answers, so don't argue with us. Maybe you're right and we're wrong, but that's too bad. This is sort of absolute monarchy. We will be arbitrary and capricious with judging the questionable answers. I should also say about judging, depending on how many teams are playing, we hope to keep up with scoring the answers in real time and have a winner by the end of the evening. But if there's like a ton of you out there, we may not be able to score it in real time. And if so, we'll have a winner tomorrow morning. And then the most important third rule is that having fun is mandatory. If you stop having fun, you have to log off. That's it. Pretty simple rules. So the first 3 rounds are going to use Atlascope, which is a tool we built at the Map Center to get access into this really cool collection of urban atlases of Boston and surrounding areas. The maps run from about 1860 to 1930. What's really cool about them is that they're super detailed down to the building level. So they have owners' names and the outlines of buildings and a ton of really fine detail. The link to Atlascope is here, atlascope.leventhalmap.org. If you Google Atlascope, you'll also find it. But we're going to be using this for the first 3 rounds, so make sure at least one person and probably everybody on your team has this open for searching. Here's a little how-to for Atlascope. So when you start Atlascope, you'll get these 3 buttons. If you happen to be standing in the place where the answer might be, you could click Find Me and use your browser's GPS to get you there. But for most of these questions, you're going to want to use the search places button. That's the middle button there, which brings up a little address search field like this. So here you can see I've typed in Fenway Park, and I've got some results for Fenway Park. One word of caution, sometimes this address search tool can be a little finicky. So like if you put in Harvard Square, the first result is Harvard Square in Brookline, and the second result is Harvard Square in Cambridge, which is counterintuitive, but make sure that you look at what the results are actually saying before you click on them. This first result is the real Fenway Park, so if I click on it, I'll get this, which, as you can see, there's a modern street map of Boston in the background. And in the middle, I have this kind of looking glass that's looking through to the past at Fenway Park. And on the lower right side, you can see that I'm looking at the year 1931. That's what this historic map is. And if you pull up that menu, you can see all the different years for which we have atlases that cover Fenway Park. So there's like about a dozen different years there, ranging from 1873 to 1938. So one thing to keep in mind is that these are real paper atlases, which means that different places have different coverage. So like if you're in Chelsea, we have a question about Chelsea. I think we only have 1 or 2 atlases, and each of those atlases is a year that covers Chelsea. Whereas if you're in downtown Boston, there's like 20 or more atlas years that cover that. And in the questions, we may ask things like, look specifically at the 1888 atlas, or look specifically at an atlas from the 20th century, or something like that, or compare the 1910 atlas to the 1890 atlas. So you'll want to switch between years that way. Okay, that's the basic how-to with Atlascope. If you get turned around and you're confused, the best thing to do is just refresh your browser and start Atlascope from start, and then you can kind of reset where you are. There's a ton of other stuff you can do in Atlascope, and you can change it. If you don't want that spyglass, you can change it to like a swipe up and down or swipe left and right. But the spyglass would probably be most useful for searching for the answers for these questions. So that is that. We're going to start with round 1. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel. Meg, we're going to say peace until the art rounds come up. Farewell until then. And Rachel, I'm going to let you take it away with round 1, Back to School Street.
Sure. So this is round 1. This is based on all of the different school streets that are in the greater Boston area. I noticed that there were quite a few, and it's kind of 'tis the season. So we are starting off with a round of school street clues. The first question, question number 1, is what year does School Street in Brighton first appear on the map?
So yeah, all of you Atlascope junkies probably know exactly what to do right now. But again, if you're starting from scratch, if you're first time with us, atlascope.leventhalmap.org. For instance, in this question, you probably want to type into the address search School Street in Brighton, and then work your way back the historic atlases to figure out which one is the earliest year that shows School Street. We're not going to hold your hand through all of them, but at the beginning here, we figured we'd make it a little bit friendlier.
We've got some Atlascope fans on the YouTube comments.
I was really surprised, Rachel, how many. I mean, I guess it makes sense that there's like a school street everywhere. But
yeah, one for every school.
Yeah. Somebody told me once that Elm Street is the most common street name in the United States. I don't know if that's a fact, but I heard it once. So now you have all heard it too. I used to live in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and it was like kind of classic little New England town. There was like the school street that went past the school. There's a bank street that went past the bank. There was Hanover Street that went in the direction of Hanover, and there was I forget what they call it. Mechanic Street went by the factories.
Hey, that's how you get to the place. So you need to know what street it is.
Yeah.
So question number 2. In nearly every year in Atlascope, School Street in Cambridge has a school on it at the same corner. What is the name of this school? So if you go to School Street, search School Street, you choose the one that it's in Cambridge, and you'll see that there is a school on the same corner almost every year, except for I think the last one. It eventually gets a name. So what name does it have?
It's the School Street School, right?
Yeah, there's a very circular naming process. And you guys might notice that Atlascope usually takes you to the oldest layer automatically, but you can, like Garrett said, go down into the right-hand corner and change which layer you're looking at.
Hey, what if there, you know how like they call intellectual circles schools, like the Frankfurt School of Social Thought? What if there was a group of thinkers at the School Street School and they were called the School Street School? I'm definitely going to start that.
I think you should start that. I don't know that you have a choice.
By the way, I couldn't figure out how to make a timer, so we're just like kind of we're giving like between 1 minute and 2 minutes for each of these questions. Of course, you can like, if you're stuck on number 1, you can keep doing that one. But I do want to show you all the closest I could figure to a timer, just because it's hilarious. This is the built-in timer for streaming. Ready? I love it, but I couldn't figure out how to get the slide to stay up at the same time. So unfortunately, you're all going to miss out on that great background music. Anyways, here's question 3.
All right, question number 3. Between 1919 and 1927, on School Street in Brookline, an ironic spelling change takes place. What's the name of the school where this happens? So again, you're going to search School Street, you're going to choose the right one, and then you're going to have to compare the 2 layers and see what changes from one to the next. We are getting some comments that Park Street is the most common name for a street. We got that on both YouTube and Facebook. So
it's got to be true then.
It's got to be true.
Disregard my Elm Street comment. It was bogus knowledge. Park Street is the most common. There was a Park Street in Lebanon where I lived too. And you know what? It went around the park.
We've also heard Main Street might be the most common. So who even knows?
I always feel bad for like, sometimes like in like as you get out of a city, like people live on a numbered highway and it doesn't actually have another name. So it'll just be like, I live on US Route 20, which I'm just so unromantic. I mean, First Street and Second Street aren't particularly lovely names either, but there's something about like my address being like, I live on US Route 20. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, it loses a little bit of the charm.
Yeah.
Charm of street
I used to live on US Route 4, but it was also called Bank Street. So we skipped out on that.
Question number 4, we're going to head to Roxbury for this one. The first year a labeled school appears on School Street in Roxbury is 1905. What school is it? So I have a hint here. It's not the George Putnam School, in case you are looking at that one and thinking that looks like a really good option. That one looks like it's actually on Seaver Street and not on School Street. So I'm sure some of these streets were named a long time before our atlases. We're actually going to see that when we get to the next question. But our atlases start like mid to late 19th century, and a lot of these streets were named, the previous century. So there are schools, including the one in Cambridge, school streets that are named after a school, and then the school goes away, and then schools come back. There's kind of a rotating chair of schools in some of these cases.
Massachusetts has a lot of schools. If you're looking for a state with a lot of schools and a history of a lot of schools, Massachusetts is a good place to be.
It's very true.
I actually wonder what state has the most schools per capita or per land area. That'd be an interesting data question to crunch. Massachusetts is going to be up there.
Definitely. I noticed that a lot of these streets are also very short, these school streets. This one, and this is maybe kind of a hint, this is the longest one that I found.
The Roxbury School Street?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about School Street in Boston proper and School Street in Roxbury. Of course, like Roxbury is administratively part of the city of Boston now, and that's like a problem for Boston postal, the post office still, because Roxbury, Dorchester, Charlestown, Hyde Park, these places were all once independent municipalities, so they could have the same street names that were in Boston. And then when they became annexed to Boston, suddenly you have technically School Street in Roxbury is School Street Boston, as is School Street downtown.
Which is the next one on the list. This is the site of the first public school in the former colonies, Boston Latin on School Street in Boston proper. It was replaced by King's Chapel in 1745, a long time before these atlases were made. By 1882, the original BLS building was long gone, but there was still a business on School Street that would have been helpful to students. What was it? So you're looking for a business this time and not for the school.
What kind of businesses are most helpful for students these days? Like a Chromebook store? Or...
Yeah, I feel like,
yeah,
I don't even know.
Shout out to all the people who either are students. Yeah, I know. Whoever out there is our students or have our parents as students or our teachers or are otherwise dealing with the truly wild experience of schooling right now. We feel you. Actually, to do a little cross marketing, we, of course, at the Map Center do a lot of K-12 programming, and our education team has some really great resources for online learning with maps and subject themes on the history of Boston, a bunch of other stuff. We just put up a learning guide for teaching with the history of Native peoples that's based off of our recent America Transformed exhibition. So if you're a teacher or you're a parent teaching kids at home, or you're an entrepreneurial kid that just loves to learn, head over to our website, leventhalmap.org. There's lots of great teaching resources, as well as reference and research resources for older students at college, university level, and adults.
Yeah, and we're always here to field research questions. So moving on to the older students, we're doing a college days round as well for round 2. So submit your answers for round 1, refresh the page so that you can submit answers again for round 2.
I just put up the URL one more time just in case you needed it.
Make sure you keep the same team name.
Also, the way we're going to do it is we'll go through round 2 now. Rachel will read through round 2, and then after round 2, we're going to read the answers to round 1. And then, after round 3, we'll read the answers to round 2 so that you don't go crazy wondering what showed up where Boston Latin used to be downtown. You only have to wait about 10 minutes. All right, you ready to go?
Yeah, let's go. Everyone's an expert now, so let's start at the Central Library for this question. In 1913, Boston University's College of the Liberal Arts moved into the old Harvard Medical School building, where the Boylston Street entrance is today. What was the name of the building at 688 Boylston where students might have nodded off in class? So for this one, you can actually, I don't know if anybody's doing this, you might just be searching the Boston Public Library, but on the main Atlascope page, you can always start at the library. There's a button for doing that.
I was just going to say, speaking of the Central Library and the Boylston Street entrance, of course, probably a lot of you know this already, but the BPL is closed for regular service, but it is open for holds pickup and for internet service. So if you're a BPL card holder, of course, you can place a request for one of our millions and millions of books, and you can come in this Boylston Street entrance and pick up your book whenever you like. And I think at most, if not all, of the branch libraries as well.
Many of them, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, should we move on?
Let's do it. If we're ever going too fast, you can always leave us a comment. So question number 2. Simmons University was founded in 1899. What is the first year that it appears on one of our urban atlases? So you're going to find out when you find the answer to this that Simmons University has had a bunch of different names over the years, and but it's always been a women's school.
Another shout out to all the Simmons Library School grads. We have tons of Simmons Library School grads in the library, in the Map Center, and throughout the library. Very close relationship. It's funny, some of these places to me feel like so far, I've only been into the library a few times over the past 7 months now since we've been closed, and I used to walk down towards the Fenway and Simmons all the time, and it feels like a distant lifetime ago.
Yeah, I haven't been back to the library at all. It's pretty weird.
Yeah, all of those. Not that the library was necessarily responsible for this business, but all of those bars on Boylston Street near the library have closed for good. Boylston Street is quite quiet. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, let's do it. Question number 3. What school, now located in Cambridge, had buildings next to the Boston Society of Natural History building, which is now a Restoration Hardware? Which I never realized that that's what that building was. But in doing the research to build out this round, I saw some pictures from inside, and it's a different universe from the one that I live in.
It's a lesson to universities everywhere. You could become a Restoration Hardware someday. When Harvard moves to whatever suburban Route 495 corridor, like the Harvard campus will be turned into Restoration Hardwares and Crate and Barrels. This is a cool building, though.
It's a really beautiful building. I always wondered because it has RH engraved in it, and it never occurred to me that was modern.
Was it a 19th century Restoration Hardware?
Yeah. All right, let's move on. So this is kind of a tough one. The statue of John Harvard used to be about a block northeast of where it is now, outside of Memorial Hall. The triangular piece of property on which this building stands had a name at one point. What was this name? I thought this one was very interesting. I just kind of stumbled across it. I also didn't know that they moved the statue, but maybe you did.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I do love this little name. It's actually though a very uncommon name now for a piece of land. You actually see it crop up. There's a little part of section of Malden, not even a section, a triangular piece of property in Malden near Fellsmere Park that has the same name, and you see it in a couple other places too. I just gave it away to everybody who lives next to Fellsmere Park in Malden.
Yeah, I'm sure like all of our participants are from Malden.
Yeah, when we look at the web stats, it's like, wow, 95% of visitors live within 50 feet of Fellsmere Park in Malden. That's not true. We hope you're all from everywhere. Being closed is a big bummer, and we super miss seeing everybody in person and, showing people the amazing historic objects that we have in the collection in person. But one of the advantages of being so digital is that we get to welcome people from all around the world. So welcome from wherever you're coming from. If somebody's coming from like super far away, shout out in the comments. Let us know who's our farthest visitor today. That'd be cool to know. But wherever you are, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. Should we go to the last question?
Last question of this round. So Northeastern University was founded by another organization, and it wasn't separate until the mid-20th century. According to our latest available maps, what was the full name of the university at its founding? So what was the full name of Northeastern University? And I definitely did not know this.
I actually did not know this either.
We have a Simmons SLIS student playing tonight, actually.
All right, how we doing? Feel like we have enough time?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Well, we're going to do the answers to round one, and it looks like we actually are keeping pace scoring, which is awesome. Shout out to our team of busy scorers behind the scenes that have kept up. So after we read these answers, we'll let you know where things stand after round one. So back to School Street. Rachel, I'll let you read.
So what year does School Street in Brighton first appear on the map? So this section of School Street first appears in 1909, but actually a lot of people said 1875 because they panned over, and they are correct. It does actually also appear in 1875, but in a slightly different place than it appears later. So we're going to give points for both those answers. Question number 2. In nearly every year in Atlascope, School Street in Cambridge has a school on it at the same corner. What is the name of this school? And the school name is the Boardman School. So the school actually was originally named Boardman School. It might not have always had it on the map, but even when it's just called like Schoolhouse, that school had been there since 1802, and it was the reason that the street was named School Street originally.
Cool.
Question number 3. Between 1919 and 1927 on School Street in Brookline, an ironic spelling change takes place. What's the name of this school where that happens? It's Pierce Grammar School, and grammar gets spelled 2 different ways. Both are correct, I believe, especially for this school in particular. I did find a lot of like historical like postcards and other documents that call it the grammar school with an E. Huh. So I don't really know what that's about. I can't explain it, but I thought that was a pretty ironic word to spell differently over the years.
It's named after Kelsey Grammer's great-great-grandfather, Pierce Grammer. Right? Isn't Kelsey Grammer with an E?
I think so.
I don't know very much about Kelsey Grammer. But I think like today the right spelling is just with an A, right? I don't know that I've ever seen it with
I don't think
E.
anybody spells it with an E anymore, but I think that at the time they did. The first year a labeled school appears on School Street in Roxbury is 1905. What school is it? And there's a hint that the George Putnam School is not it. It is actually the Ellis Mandel School. So you have to pan up a little bit, pan northwest a little bit on School Street to get to that answer. But there it is. There's also a cute little home for aged couples on that street.
I love that.
I tried to work it in, but I couldn't figure out a way to work it in.
Maybe we'll have an aged couples round next time we play.
That's true, and everyone who's here now has an edge on everybody else. And question number 5, by 1882, the original BLS building was gone, but there was still a business on School Street that would have been helpful to students. What was it? And the answer is a bookstore. So there's this bookstore in 1882. You might have noticed when you were answering this question that there are 2 different atlases from 1882 that we have. One of them is significantly more helpful than the other. And that's because they were making them for different things. So most of these are fire insurance atlases, or kind of just like, what's the other reason that you would want an atlas?
Real estate.
Real estate, yeah.
Real estate sale, yeah.
So the real estate ones, some of those are a little bit less interesting, I think, than the fire atlases, because the fire ones have all these like color coding for the different types of buildings. And they tell you about like the windows that are on the front of the building and all this weird stuff.
If you want to know a ton more about these atlases from kind of a historical perspective, I'm going to say this at the end too, but next Tuesday at 7 p.m., we're going to be live again on YouTube and Facebook and the East Boston Branch Library doing an Atlascope tour of East Boston. So tune in for that if you want to hear more about these atlases and how we made Atlascope. Okay, cool. Well, I'm looking at the results and man, a lot of people went 5 for 5 on that round. I don't even know if I can name every team that went 5 for 5 on round 1, but it includes Bogganway, Mario Cartography 64, Compass Rose Gold, Sylvatica, Ridgeway Lane, Type 3 Snowplow, Joe Map-O, and Granite State of Mind, Super Penguins, Zoom Roasted, Mashed Potatoes, and the New Geographers. So luckily, we're going to crank up the difficulty dial a little longer. If you weren't amongst those teams, don't worry. A lot of other people had 3 or 4 points, so it's still competitive. But we could have some hot competition for the prize tonight. So our third round is on vanished ecologies. Boston obviously has not always been a city with a lot of pavement and buildings. It looked very different even 100 and certainly 200 years ago. So this round is about natural features that have disappeared from the landscape of our modern city. The first question is, in the area that's now between Charlestown, Somerville, and Cambridge, it's now the rail yards and I-93 just north of the Zakim Bridge, but it used to be a river. What was this river's name? And as a hint, you might want to look on Cambridge maps northeast of the O'Brien Highway, which used to be called Bridge Street. Again, something about these maps is the original historic objects were typically published to cover like a political area. So, we have maps of Cambridge that end at the borders of Cambridge, and we have maps of Somerville that end at the borders of Somerville. And that sometimes makes the areas at borderlines harder to find on the map because of the way that they were published. And so, the years for Cambridge might have been different from the years for Somerville. So you actually can see this on, I think, Charlestown, Somerville, and Cambridge maps, but it's easiest to find on the edge of Cambridge maps.
Yeah, I think when I was testing this one out, I forgot, I did not take the hint, and I was looking at the Charlestown one, but it's there. It's just a little bit trickier.
Yeah, well, again, if you want to learn more about how we actually transform these paper objects into these cool digital maps that map onto reality, come to our Tuesday night East Boston event next week, and we'll tell you a lot more about the behind the scenes of Atlascope. All right, question 2. 100 years ago, between Fresh Pond and the Belmont Cemetery, which is southwest of the pond, there was a small body of water where the Parkside Apartments tower now stands. What was it called? I'm really interested in this. I found this on the Atlas, and I did a little more research into it. I couldn't find much about it other than it was like super polluted by the time that they filled it in. But like just in general, Atlascope is so fun as like a springboard for research, right? Because you find these places, and then you might look up photos in Digital Commonwealth. We're going to talk about Digital Commonwealth in the next round. You might do research in newspaper archives. There's all sorts of other historical sources that we offer at the library. And I tried to look into this pond, whose name I'm not going to give away by accident, but it was. I didn't do a ton of deep research, but piqued my curiosity. So.
Yeah, I noticed there are a couple little tiny bodies of water there around that area.
Yeah.
But it's not surprising that it was super polluted, because that was one of the reasons that they filled stuff. It was not just because they wanted land, but because of the miasmatic theory of disease. They thought that bad smells coming off of water and stuff like that would make you sick.
Yeah.
And they were close.
One of my favorite objects in the collection is we have the smell map of Boston from the late 19th century before the Back Bay was completely filled. And like, you're exactly right. One of the big complaints about the Back Bay tidal flats was they smelled not only like tidal flats, but also like sewage flats, because the city was pumping sewage into them. And people were like, smells really bad, especially when the wind is in the right direction. So question 3. This marshy coastal peninsula is now home to a university, a library, and a public housing development. Before that, in the 1800s, it was used to pasture a specific type of animal. What kind of animal were pastured here? And just a hint, this label is like very generously stretched out on one of the atlases.
I had a hard time finding this one. And I already knew it was there.
This is one of my, you could teach an entire course on the sort of environmental and urban history of Boston about just this peninsula. There's like so many themes: history, urban development, social change, community conflict, financial speculation, like so much. You really could do like a whole course just on this peninsula. Maybe we will do it someday.
Yeah, I can definitely see you doing that.
All right, should we do the next one?
Let's go.
So South Bay, the South Bay Shopping Center was still marshland up until the 20th century. South Bay literally was a bay. A lot of people go shopping there and don't think about that. One of the 1889 atlases of South Bay gives names to the different marsh areas there that were cut apart by drainage channels. So if you look on this one of these 1889 atlases, you'll see different marshes given names. What's the name of the marsh that specifically covered the area that is now an Applebee's, an Olive Garden, Stop and Shop, and Old Navy? Applebee Marsh. Yeah. That's actually where Applebee's got its name, from the old historic Applebee Marsh. It's actually always interesting to me, so in this atlas, in addition to a lot of the atlases of the marshlands, you'll see that they did trace these tidal drainage channels. And I always think that must have been a lot of, it was important to them because they formed property boundaries, but I always say, if you're familiar with the flats around Ipswich, behind Cranes Beach, or around Lynn, that's what these areas looked like back then. And if you can imagine wading out there in 19th century clothes, to map these drainage channels, it must have been not the most pleasant job. They certainly weren't doing aerial surveys.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Every time I think too hard about how they made these maps, my brain just shuts down and I can't.
It's a ton of work.
Yeah.
Okay, last question in the vanished ecologies round. Brighton was once a major destination for livestock brought to the city for slaughter, and the Cattle Fair Hotel occupied a prominent location on Washington Street at Market Street. On the 1875 and 1882 maps, you'll see that the Cattle Fair Hotel also owned a parcel of land a few blocks south of their hotel. Here, on this other piece of land owned by the Cattle Fair Hotel, there is a pond named after another animal, not cattle, and this pond disappeared by the 1885 map. What was the name of this pond? Brighton's super. If you span around the Brighton and Alston maps, you'll see like just how much livestock transshipment and slaughterhouse facilities were in that area at the end of the 19th century. We actually, I think our first Atlascope trivia way back in January when we did it in person in the library, we asked a question about this, about the slaughtering facilities that were along the Charles River in Alston. But it's really amazing to see how much space these took out. I mean, not surprising because livestock take up space.
Take up a lot of space.
Yep. It's also interesting to think like this agricultural history of Boston, right? Like people had to drive their cattle into town, you know, from outlying areas. Railroads changed that somewhat, but still people were bringing their cattle in for marketing and sale and slaughter. And they had to stay somewhere, so this whole hotel and hospitality industry grew up around it. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of round 3. So let's zoom back to our old college days. Seems like forever ago. Rachel, you want to do the answers to these?
Yeah, sure. So college days, question number 1. We're starting at the Central Library. What was the name of the building at 688 Boylston Street where students might have nodded off in class? The answer to this one is Jacob Sleeper Hall. So this one was actually funny. There's a bunch of different Jacob Sleeper Halls over the years. I guess once they abandoned one of them or sold one of them, they had to build another one for this same guy. But this one was right where our Boylston Street entrance is today.
Yeah, it's too bad. It would have been nice to be neighbors with BU and the Athletic Association. The Johnson building of the library is very wonderful as well, especially since our renovation.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Now, question number 2. Simmons University was founded in 1899. What is the first year it appears on one of our urban atlases? The answer to this one is 19.
Sorry, my mouse wasn't in this.
Wasn't clicking. 1906. So either campus you went to, I chose the main campus. 1906. This building is the first time this building appears, but it's also true for the residential campus. The first time it appears is 1906. Question number 3, what Cambridge school had buildings next to the Boston Society of Natural History building, which is now a Restoration Hardware? So if you searched Restoration Hardware, I would say that's the best way to find this one. And MIT had their buildings right next to the Natural History Society building, which again is very beautiful. Much more beautiful than the the MIT buildings, which are now like a Nordstrom Rack and H&M. So if you got to choose.
There's a fun MIT too. If you look where MIT really is, I can't remember off the top of my head which year, but you can see that the area that's now MIT's main campus was planned as this kind of like curvilinear suburban development, and actually one of our atlases shows that plan. I don't know the year off the top of my head, but you can find it. It's cool to see MIT grow in Cambridge where it now stands.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about some of these real estate atlases is that they show things that don't really exist and end up never existing.
Mm-hmm.
So the statue of John Harvard used to be about a block northeast of where it is now, outside of Memorial Hall. The triangular piece of property on which the building stands had a name at one point. What was this name? The answer is College Delta, which I really liked. I thought that was great. I wish all plots of land had little names.
Delta, Delta, Delta. It blew my mind did you know Delta Airlines is also named after that, the Delta logo is like a triangle. I used to think it had something to do with because I knew it was from the South, like the Mississippi Delta or something, but.
I thought it was just the fourth best airline.
Yeah. Yeah, back when they were naming the airlines.
Yeah. They went in order. Question number 5. Northeastern University was founded by another organization. What was the full name of the university at its founding? So Northeastern was actually called Northeastern University of the Boston YMCA. It was founded by the YMCA. So I thought that was really interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah, it was like, do Northeastern students have fun? They do the YMCA song as like a thing? Any Northeastern grads out there is this a thing that you all know about and that you joke about? It's kind of cool.
It's a very fun fact.
Cool. All right. Well, we are going to move into our 2 visual arts focused rounds. So we're finished with Atlascope for now. Rachel, I'm going to swap you out for Megan, but we'll bring you back on at the end as we wrap up the show. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. See you, Rachel. All right. Here's Megan. Hi, Meg.
Hey, Garrett. I'm
How are
loving hanging in, loving seeing these answers coming in. The team names tonight, not to say that they weren't great last time, are on fire.
Oh my goodness. Speaking of team names, I did not give an update about where we stand after round 2, now that we just gave the answers. And it looks to me like, how am I going to do this? Because okay. So it looks like a couple of teams are still clinging to a perfect score after round 2. Mario Kartography 64, Gold, Type 3 Snowplow, Joe Mipo, and Zoom Roasted, and the New Geographers are all still 10 for 10 as of round 2. And then there's a bunch of other teams that are right behind them. So don't get lazy, perfect teams yet. You're not out of the woods yet.
I want to know who
Meg,
Dad the Magnificent is.
Dad the Magnificent. Dad the Magnificent. I'm sure you're a magnificent dad. As another dad, all dads are most dads are magnificent. It is magnificent to be a dad, and I will just want to say I'm with you, Dad the Magnificent. All right, Meg, you want to tell people how to use Digital Commonwealth and what it's all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to pull it up here too. Actually, you have the adjacent slides too, I think. So Digital Commonwealth is an incredible digital repository that it pulls not only from BPL's collections, but from collections across the state of Massachusetts. All digitized items, and it is an invaluable resource that's constantly being updated and improved by the continuous ingest from all of these institutions. And it allows you to search by location, collections, institutions, and format, among other categories. And what you're going to look for here is the institutions field and find, as it says on the slideshow, Boston Public Library. That will enable you to search within the collections. All of the questions that are coming your way tonight are answers are findable within the BPL section of Digital Commonwealth. So once you get to BPL's page, you can search within by keyword, place, format, subjects, And that will open up, I think, our latest count, or at least for pages, 23,288 pages based on this last screenshot. So as I said, our digitization team is doing a magnificent job of keeping this going and continuing to digitize our collections among so many others across the state to make them accessible. So this is like a rabbit hole tool beyond your wildest dreams. But tonight you're going to be using the BPL pages, and you can search even further by place and narrow down the subject. If there's something pertinent to say Boston or Copley Square this evening. The other piece that's going to be helpful to you guys tonight is by collections. So we have in some cases, or many cases actually, arranged objects, digitized objects here into collections of distinction, collections by photographer, collections by engraver. So you'll find a collections page here as well. But I think for the purposes of tonight, you guys are going to want to use that top search bar next to BPL, and that will enable you to get closer to the answers we're looking for.
You know, you're like us, or that your brain is just broken in the way that ours are when you on Safari or a lot of browsers, it's like pops up your like top sites, like most visited sites. And for me, it's like Digital Commonwealth.
Digital Commonwealth.
And like, map tools and stuff. And it's like, oh, wow, this isn't even my work computer. This is my personal computer.
I use it all the time. Like I find myself getting lost down rabbit holes at 10:30 p.m. And finding things that are increasingly relevant to work, but then spin you off into 10 different directions. So, Garrett, I think you're handling the first round of these questions. These were compiled by our colleague Eve in the Fine Arts Department. So these 4 rounds pertain to some art components that are on display throughout the building, but others that are held in prints and or fine arts.
Yep, and thanks to Eve for writing these questions. She couldn't be here tonight, but we're going to read them in her absence. So, question 1 for round 4. The BPL owns one large painting by Winslow Homer. What does this large painting depict?
I don't want to give away the plot too much, but this is where the format, or the medium, as we'd call it in kind of the museum world, is really going to come into play. We have quite a number of objects that have been digitized by Winslow Homer, but many of them are chromolithographs, or I think they're actually wood engravings as well. So there's a plethora of Homer available to you, but we're specifically searching for one painting. That for those of you who visited the Rare Books and Manuscripts department before we went into our current renovation, it was actually on display there in the main reading room. So some of you who are frequent library visitors may have seen it.
Also, Winslow's a great. I've
IRL.
never met another Winslow, but I wish I was a Winslow. I love the name Winslow.
I feel particularly partial to Winslow Homer because he apparently summered, or rather, he had cousins in the far off town of Belmont, Massachusetts. So going out into the countryside, up the hill to visit his family, and has a lot of strong links to that town. Frederick Law Olmsted, actually, another Belmont connection. So he was definitely, or the Winslow Homer, or the Homer family, I should say, a source of local pride. And the Belmont Women's Club is actually now resident in the former Winslow, or the former Homer house. Again, I keep wanting to just throw Winslow in there whenever we can.
All right, question 2. A macabre 19th century writer referred to Boston writers as frog pondians. There is a bronze bust of this writer in the fiction section of the Johnson building of BPL. Can you find the street that this writer was born on in a photo in Digital Commonwealth? Hint, if you asked him if he were a Bostonian, he might reply, nevermore.
Nevermore, nevermore. Isn't there, there's a Gauguin painting, Nevermore, with really macabre crows in the background. It's like I'm trying to think of what collection it is. Not ours, but fantastic if you're into more into painting than you are into this particular 19th century writer's work.
We're going to reveal, of course, the answers to round 3 in a little bit, but there's going to be a fun little link between an answer to round 3 and this question. Hold tight. Okay, question 3. One Boston-born individual was part of the founding of the United States and was also a leading writer, printer, political philosopher, politician, Freemason, postmaster, scientist, inventor, humorist, civic activist, statesman, and diplomat. You know, like all the things you have on your resume, right? Like you all have the writer section, the printer section, the Freemason section, the civic activist section. Anyways, we have actually more than one painting of this figure in the BPL, but we have a very lovely 1779 portrait of them in Digital Commonwealth. Who painted this portrait, the 1779 portrait of this famous Boston-born writer, painter, etc.? Writer, printer, political philosopher, etc.
Sometimes when you, when you go through phases where you're hiring and you're reading through resume after resume after resume, can you imagine coming across a resume like this one?
How about a business card? Like a long business card.
Like the little Moo business cards they allow you to create, that they're going to have to come out with a long format business card. I keep wanting to say this individual's name and I'm not going to, but that would be quite a resume to discover in the pile.
Mm-hmm. I like to like soothe myself in thinking like it's way harder today to be good at a bunch of things because like we know so much more about them. You know, in the 18th century, you could be like, a rock. I've named this rock. Like now I'm amongst the top 10 geologists in the entire world. Whereas now you need to like study geology for 30 years to make like and publish 50 peer-reviewed papers.
And that's the other thing. It's like, I feel like they're like for all of us in COVID times, here we are thinking now is the time to start your, and I'm not writing a novel, but now is the time to pursue extracurricular activities, other interests, scholarly pursuits, and like all pandemic pieces aside, that's obviously not happening. But I also think there are so many distractions out there today that keep us away from, say, becoming a humorist, a statesman or woman. It's my excuse, the internet, Netflix.
There's a funny Tom the Dancing Bug cartoon of Hemingway where he has a typewriter and then it's like, oh, and this typewriter also like can send messages to your friends and it has a little projector screen to watch movies on it. And like, you know, it does like all these things that like a modern computer does. And it's like Hemingway was, you know, wrote 3 sentences in his whole lifetime.
It's like the Hemingway.
Okay, question 4.
Yeah.
Sorry, we just scrambled the video for a second. But question 4. BPL has an 1881 oil painting portrait of a pioneering woman journalist and editor. Who is the subject of this painting and what is she holding in her hand?
I'm not going to give away there's a request in the notes actually here to go back to 4.2 for a second, Garrett.
Oh, okay. We'll whoever wanted to go back to 4.2, we'll do it after 4.5. We'll toggle back to it at the very end.
Now, I'm not going to give away the answer on this one, but I will say that as I look through the question that Eve wrote, the painter behind this piece actually holds some interesting links to 2 of our major mural painters in the library, was a good friend of John Singer Sargent and Edwin Austin Abbey, and actually resided, although he was American, resided in Broadway, England, and essentially assembled a little artist colony there. And it was the place where, for those Sargent fans out there, Sargent was staying and playing tennis and hanging out and having pastoral summer English times in the Cotswolds and painted Carnation Lily, Lily Rose. This artist also passed away, sadly, in the sinking of the Titanic. And that's a shout out for our illustrious scorer, Belle Lipton, tonight.
She's on the Titanic. She's listening to the Titanic soundtrack and she scores.
We align on that. We both have a irrational love for the Titanic soundtrack, the movie score, not Celine Dion, with all due respect.
I'm gonna say it on live YouTube. I have never seen Titanic. I lived through the 90s. I lived through the 2000s. I have never seen Titanic.
You should see the chat right now, people of the world.
I know. Yeah.
Oh, I meant to tell you about my day.
Too many VHS tapes. All right, last question for round 4. When she was unveiled in 1896, this piece caused a frenzy amongst Bostonians who were outraged by her apparent embrace of drinking. She clasps a symbolic bunch of grapes in her outstretched hand. Debauchery, she's a nude dancing figure. And worst of all, the fact that she was subjecting an infant held in her hand to this behavior. The community clamored for her removal, and McKim, Charles Fallon McKim, the architect of our historic McKim building, transferred the gift to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It was much later that it was recast for the library and reinstalled in the courtyard of the Boston Public Library. What is the name of this sculpture that is in the fountain of the McKim building's courtyard?
We're being very active in the sidebar chat. We have to have a Titanic round next time. I think we can do it.
My ground team is telling me that you have a diorama that pertains to the Titanic. Tell me about it.
Well, I was, as you can imagine, extremely social, not at all, in 6th grade. And I spent some time with a stack of books on my desk constructing a scale model of the Titanic using various materials that I'd taken from the lab that we were in. And my teacher came over to me having seen it and realizing that I wasn't paying attention to anything that was going on in class, picked up the stack of books and said, you think you're really smart? You know, you're clearly so smart that you can focus on building whatever you're building on your desk. I'm going to show you some physics. And he slammed the books down and said, it's gravity. Get it? Crush my Titanic model. And that was my reason for being in 6th grade. And it was gone. Yeah. And then I became Belle says, but you didn't display it. I didn't display it. No, I hid it behind my desk because it was still under construction. So I was not only into Titanic, the film, I was into Titanic as a historical subject.
The thing itself, the boat.
Yeah.
The ship. Yeah.
And you bet your bottom dollar I tried to pitch that for my thesis in college. Didn't happen. But.
The Titanic, or like your experience being crushed by this jerk teacher?
I think it was more because I was an architect.
That would have been a great thesis, frankly.
It would have been. I think I was an architecture student looking for a really cool grant to do some research aboard one of the vessels. So I pitched like early 20th century transatlantic seafaring architecture. It didn't go through. Next time. Next time a hubristic ocean liner sinks on the way to North America. Although they are apparently making a replica, I've heard, right? Isn't that supposed to launch in 2022-3? Belle will know.
Really? Oh man, see,
yeah.
I'm not signed up for.
Oh no. I think we actually just lost Garrett. All right, so I think we might actually have to relaunch this, and now I'm flying solo without access to the slideshow. So if you guys,
I'm back. I don't know what happened. My browser just stopped. I didn't even click anything. I swear. Hold on, I'm back.
He's back. Thank goodness. I was about to have to share.
Meg, that was your Titanic moment. It was the ship was sinking.
And the band didn't play on. The band just stared at the screen going, where did Garrett go? Where are the slides?
All right. Well, with that dramatic interruption, we're going to go back to round 3, give the answers to vanished ecologies. The area between Charlestown, Somerville, and Cambridge, it's now a bunch of rail yards and I-93 going north. That was the Millers River. And in fact, there is a little bit of like signage about the Millers River. If you walk in that park that goes under the Zachem Bridge, you can see there's some signage about the Millers River, which was like an important little spot for for small boat shipping traffic up until it was filled. 100 years ago, between Fresh Pond and the Belmont Cemetery, there was a small body of water where the Parkside Apartments now stand. What is it called? What was it called? It was the Cider Mill Pond. Here it is on, I think, a 1930s map, but it's on a bunch of the maps. I'm super curious about this. I want to know about the cider mill, first of all. I couldn't find the cider mill on any of the atlases, so it must have been a like pre-1860s cider mill. But I want to know about it. Curious. There's lots of things that Atlascope makes you curious about. This marshy coastal peninsula, now home to a university, library, public housing development, and before that, it was a pasture. What kind of animals were pastured here? It was the calf pasture. So you can see the text is really stretched along here. This is Harbor Point or Columbia Point, now home to UMass Boston and the JFK Library and the Columbia Point Housing Complex, Boston College High School. But it was known as the calf pasture for a long time. And in fact, this one of the first kind of industrial developments there was a pumping station, a sewage pumping station, which is actually on this map just to the right of where I've circled the text there. And it was called sometimes called the calf pasture pumping station. So that was like a place name that was in use. Okay, South Bay was a bay, a marsh, and the 1889 Atlas gives names to the different marsh areas that were cut apart by drainage channels. What was the name of the marsh that covered Applebee's, Olive Garden, Stop and Shop, and Old Navy? It was Captain William Clapp's Marsh. I've rotated this map here so you can see it straight up, but that running at the top of that map is East Chester, which later became Mass Ave, so that's now Mass Ave running sort of by the where you would go into the shopping center from Mass Ave. But this, you can see, was Clapp's Marsh, and there's a bunch of others. Howes Marsh, Tolman Marsh, Lamiste Marsh. Kind of interesting that they named all of these. Probably so that they could claim them and earn the profits of selling them to development. Brighton was once a major destination for livestock brought to the city. The Cattle Fair Hotell was in Brighton, and it owned a parcel of land a few blocks south that had a pond, which was a frog pond. So you can see the Cattle Fair Hotel Corporation owned this little piece of land on Chestnut Hill. And there's the frog pond, probably just like a little marshy area. You know, kids would have called it the frog pond, and unsurprisingly, it was filled. In fact, even in this map, you can see along Lexington Ave that parcels have been platted out, which means somebody's planning on building here. Okay, as of the end of round 3, there are still a couple. Yes, there are 2 teams that are still 15 for 15 as of that point. Mario Cartography 64 and the Type 3 Snowplow are both 15 for 15 after that round. But we do have some fluctuating. Some people went up in the rankings, some people went down. It's still anyone's game to win. As we have our final Built Heritage round, it's your chance to take a lap around the second place contestants. So Meg, I'm going to turn it over to you for round 5.
Fantastic. And I would say we gave people ample time with all that Titanic chat in round 4. So high expectations for that. Okay, we're ready to rock. So this is BPL's Built Heritage, which pertains to the art, architecture, and decorative arts of the Central Library in Copley Square. So kicking off with the McKim Building. The Central Library's McKim Building's east side is one of, or among Boston's most iconic facades. There are 15 upper arch windows on the east facade. That's the one facing Copley Square and Dartmouth Street. How many more arches are there compared now, I should say, how many more arches are there compared to what was proposed in an architect's rendering circa 1888? So we're looking for the difference in the windows that were originally proposed in a particular rendering and the windows that are now extant. And
I think of this as like the more cowbell question. Like somebody was like, McKim, more arches. I need more arches. There's not enough arches on this diagram.
Well, interestingly, I think McKim was actually looking at a couple architectural precedents for the design of the facade. So he had the Tempio Malatestiano by Alberti and Rimini, and probably more closely resembling the Bibliothèque Sainte-Geneviève in Paris by Le Brousse. So he had a couple facades that he was looking to emulate, and the Marshall Field wholesale sales store actually as well in Chicago. And he loved his windows, needed more. So
windows are great. Unless you're a rare books collection, in which case windows are fun.
Unless you're storing rare and valuable objects. They're great for a reading room though. Yeah. So these are actually the windows on Bates Hall.
Shall we go to number 2?
Let's do it. Okay, so we're going to actually essentially lead our way into the building, taking a closer look. So we've gone from the facade onto a smaller portion of the facade, and that is a particular sculpture right above our central doorway. Artists Domingo Mora and Augustus St. Gaudens partnered to carve the head of Minerva, who now graces the keystone of the central doorway arch leading to the McKim building. What is the figure that adorns her helmet? So hint for this one, it's easier to see this particular figure on her helmet in the artist model than it is to see it in real life. In real life, it was rendered in Milford granite, and by the whims of the medium or perhaps some environmental declination over the years, the figure, I was just looking at it yesterday more closely, it's not as easy to identify, but this particular model on Digital Commonwealth will lead you to the answer.
And we've noted too, you can always zoom in on these images. That's one of the great things about Digital Commonwealth and all the historic objects that are in it. So you can zoom in oftentimes close enough to see like the tears in the paper, or the fibers in the paper of the photograph or the print or whatever it is that you're looking at.
That's what's incredible, is that we've had, with great thanks to our photographers and the digitization team, we've been able to amass some really incredible high-res images of our collection items, and it allows this zoom-in capability that you couldn't have with eagle eyes. It's unbelievable.
All right, you ready for number 3?
Indeed. Okay, so 5.3, heading inside the McKim building now, the grand staircase of the Central Library's McKim building has been photographed throughout its history. In the middle of the 20th century, there was a slight structural addition to the staircase. What was it? And the hint here is think accessibility. And I'm trying to think of a way to describe this without giving away the plot. So I'm going to stop talking about the staircase because I'll mention it inadvertently.
It was a water slide. I'll give it away.
It was a slip and slide in the lobby, and then they wanted some elevation, so they stuck the water slide on the stairs. Actually, interestingly, another addition, we've had some lighting features that were switched in and out over the years, but there were 2 sculptures, one of Satan and one of Christ, flanking the landing of the McKim staircase. And one of them was actually pushed off of the landing and fell, damaging both the sculpture and the stairs. So when you're back in the building, when we can welcome folks back, you'll see a little spider crack pattern in the marble from where that sculpture made contact. It's quite apparently, for those who were there, witnessed it happened about 15, 20 years ago. It was a deafening sound. So the other sculpture has since been removed.
Marble and marble is nothing as pleasant sound. All right.
Okay, moving on to 4. Let's do it. One of my favorites now, John Singer Sargent's Triumph of Religion mural cycle on the 3rd floor includes multiple references to celestial features, including one particular planet depicted in the right corner of a lunette. What is the name of this planet? So for this one, there are actually 4 mural installation cycles, and you're going to be looking for a particular installation phase that encompasses 6 lunettes as well as another arch. You'll find it in one of those.
I guess you have a 1 in 9 chance of guessing this, right?
You have a 1 in 9 chance. You can just not use Digital Commonwealth. And just, although, what about poor Pluto? Is it only 1 in 8 now?
Well, what if Pluto's the answer? I don't. Was Pluto a planet to John Singer Sargent? Is the question.
In this particular year, which again I'm not going to mention, I'll say just early 20th century. Was Pluto a planet?
Yeah, I think Pluto was not discovered till like the. Where's our astronomers out there? But I want to say it was like in the mid-century, right?
I did a little bit of research.
Clyde Tombaugh. I can remember that for some reason. Clyde Tombaugh discovered it. I don't remember when. Mid-century, though, maybe.
I did a little bit of research into this particular panel for a blog post that's upcoming on some of the other celestial references and whether or not the imagery predates the photography imagery that was available, and thinking about how Sargent would have had access to seeing these celestial bodies. So coming soon to a blog near you.
Careful, you're going to unveil that it's all a fake. The murals were printed on an inkjet printer in 1997.
1997, yeah, what can we say? We had to replace that one. So hopefully that gives folks enough time. 5.5, the last round, or actually the last question of the night. Another mural cycle here. We have a mural cycle by Puvis de Chavannes on the 2nd floor staircase area. Puvis de Chavannes' mural cycle at the Central Library contains 2 technologies. These are 2 advancements in technology, if you will, that would have been out of place in the classical period, but extant in the late 19th century when they were painted. So what are the 2 features in his BPL panels that are distinctly not classical? We probably should have put one of these as a bonus question because it's a little esoteric, but we'll see what people come up with.
Maybe we'll give half points if you get 1 and full points if you get 2. This could be the tie-breaking final detail.
This could be it. You have to be a super nerd to get this one. Get excited, everyone. And if you've ever been on an art and architecture tour, this will definitely give you a leg up, at least on one of these components. So excited to see what's happening.
It's going to be like there is an iPod in the angel's hands.
We've heard that actually. So we ask this, I say we broadly, our wonderful art and architecture tour guides often ask this as a quiz to folks looking at the murals on site. And there happens to be a sculpture or a painting of a sculpture holding a stone tablet. And when we ask this question, I can't tell you how many people, particularly younger visitors, say, well, that's a Kindle. And then when you start to shake their head, they're like, iPad? Well, it's and then there's another figure holding their hand to their head in contemplation, and they think it's a cell phone or that they're holding a device to their ear. So I think our younger visitors might be a little out of touch with what was available in the late 19th century / classical times.
You don't think Siobhan chatted on his cell phone very much?
Yeah, I think
he's just contemplating.
I think he was contemplating. I like to think he would have been more of an iPhone guy.
Yeah.
I think some of our designers may have been more I feel like it's always the iPhone versus the Google. This is where I'm exposing my non-millennial cred.
Which one fits better into the classical period? What would the muses have used? Probably a Zune, right?
Yeah, the muses of inspiration definitely had access to the iPhone X, 10. We'll find out. I like to think that they may have been Apple-centric because of their interest in design.
It's like, I love all these, people will find like 19th century photographs or whatever, where it's like, for whatever reason, it just looks like there's something super out of place. Like somebody who's wearing modern street clothes or like, looks like they're using a phone or whatever, and those are so kind of fun.
It's like there's evidence. There's evidence of technology before its time.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's an inclusion of something that's totally out of place. So I'm looking forward to hearing what people say. Hopefully that gives everybody enough time, and we can start, I guess, actually, Garrett, to go through the answer rounds, right, for round 4?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Hey, Rachel, you want to come back and just join us for the last answer rounds? Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
Hey, Rachel.
Good to see you again. Because we'll take a little bit longer on the answers for round 4, because then we go right to the answers for round 5, and our scorers have to squirrel away behind the scene and do their thing. So please submit your answers to round 5 so they can grade them. And we're going to zoom back to the art history round, artists and techniques. So good old Winslow. Don't we wish we were all named Winslow? The BPL owns one large painting by Winslow, whose name I will say one more time. Homer. What does this painting by Winslow depict? It is Captain W.F. Bartlett and Lieutenant Colonel F.W. Palfrey at Camp Benton, Maryland, in November 1861. These are both officers of the 20th Mass Volunteers talking, and there's a soldier, looks like he's about to give the officers a message. There's tents in the background, a very classic Civil War scene. You don't need to have described all of this, just the main figures of the painting to get credit.
I believe we gave credit for 3 guys in Maryland. So
yeah, Winslow Homer's famous 1861 painting, 3 Guys in Maryland.
A Baltimore Ravens romance.
All right. Question 2, speaking of Baltimore, speaking of Maryland, a macabre 19th century writer referred to Boston writers as frog pondians. That was the little link. Remember the Cattle Hotel had owned the Frog Pond in Brighton. Anyways, this writer referred to Boston writers as frog pondians. There's a bronze bust of him in the fiction section. Can you find the street he lived on? Macabre, it's gotta be Edgar Allan Poe. Those two, he's synonymous with macabreness. But he was born on Carver Street, and here's a photograph of his birthplace in Digital Commonwealth from I think this is from the Boston Pictorial Collection, which is like a really amazing set of photographs about early 20th century Boston. Okay, a Boston-born individual who was a founder of the United States and also had this awesome business card, like this log. He just like dropped this business card with a little scroll that had all these things on it. And at the end of that scroll was this painting, 1779 portrait. It was Ben Franklin. We asked you for the artist. Meg, I'm going to turn over to you. My French is garbage.
Oh gosh, well,
Duplessis.
Duplessis is the last name. Joseph Siffre Duplessis, portrait of Benjamin Franklin, not to be confused with the Joseph Wright portrait by Benjamin Franklin that is also in the collection. And both of these were on display in the trustees' room back in the day. So
and he's wearing a very similar outfit in both.
He is indeed, yeah. This is the one that I believe preceded the secondary painting by Wright. And Wright was actually tapped to be, I think, one of the engravers at the Mint because he was a great copyist and great renderer. And I think he actually died before he could take on the commission. So this is the original of the two, or the first of the two.
Cool. I was noticing that the caption metadata for this was talking about how Franklin was famously like wouldn't wear a powdered wig, which of course was the fashion in France at the day because he was like too earthy to, you know, I'm like imagining he has Birkenstocks on below this painting, but like he's like powdered wigs, like no, I'm way too natural for that.
Good New England roots.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, question 4 from round 4. We have an 1881 oil painting portrait of a pioneering woman journalist and editor. Who's the subject of this painting, and what is she holding in her hand? That would be the journalist editor Kate Field. and she's holding flowers. You may have to zoom in on the image to actually see that little garland of flowers that she has in her left hand.
And interestingly, I think we put this one either in the metadata or in the object label that accompanies the physical painting. Some of the critics actually took issue with the garishness of the yellow surrounds. It's sort of yellow velvet decor. So they cited that as being a poor choice for background. But apparently she liked to make a stand. And Frances Davis Millett is the artist originally from Mattapoisett, Massachusetts, who died on Titanic. That led us down that Titanic size length rabbit hole.
Yeah, if it had never sank, we would have had so many more Millett paintings and one fewer great 90s movie. Or was it? Oh, when was Titanic? I want to say 90s, but was it early 2000s?
1997, Garrett.
1997. Okay. Got it.
4 hours of your life that are just waiting for you, for you to be reclaimed.
I don't have a VHS player. How am I supposed to watch it? Okay, the last question from round 4 was, when she was unveiled in 1896, this shockingly scandalous piece caused a frenzy amongst the famously prude Bostonians. She was drunk, she was dancing, she had an infant in her arms, and so McKim said, "You guys are losers, I'm taking my statue back, I'm giving it to New York," where it still is in the collections of the Met in New York. And what we got almost 100 years later was a copy. Once Boston kind of cooled its jets and said, okay, it's fine to have it, that would be Bacchante and Infant Fawn. Meg, I know this is one of your favorite little stories. Do you want to say anything more about it?
A bone of contention. Well, basically, there's adjacent to this, and this is where we can kill some time to give our wonderful scorer a minute on round 5. She was placed in the courtyard. The City Arts Commission accepted her. And, she's all done, so I'll speed this up. Promptly removed after she caused said frenzy, and she remained pretty active in the press as illustrations, cartoons, and the subject of a lot of visual mockery, and became so famous that they made multiple small-scale copies, and one particular replica copy that ended up at the MFA. And it was actually the MFA that enabled us to make a cast of their copy. So we have a copy of a copy, Bacchante 3. She was returned to her rightful place in the last renovation or restorations of the McKim building. And the trustee, Francis Walker, you can't see in this photo, who is instrumental in having her taken down and removed, is now staring at her and gets to look at her for the rest of time. So it's a wonderful juxtaposition.
Cool. All right, Meg, I'll let you do the answers to round 5. And it sounds like our scores actually do have, and it looks like we have a winner. So
champion
on the edge of your seat,
champion. All right.
we will reveal at the end of these round 5 questions.
We'll try to go through these as soon as possible. So 5.1, we're talking about the facade. How many more upper arch windows are there now than there were originally proposed in an architect's rendering in 1888? The answer is 2 more. So I love that reference. I'm going to use that, Garrett, in some interpretation. More cowbell, more windows, 2 more. 13 originally proposed in this particular rendering, 15 in reality. And we're lucky to have them too. They add some wonderful light in Bates Hall.
When I sit in Bates Hall, I'm like, imagine if there were only 13 windows in here.
I know.
Lucky they are.
Endgame. Why would you go? All right, right on our facade, we talked about the head of Minerva and artist Domingo Mora and Augusta St. Gaudens, who collaborated on her carving. What is the figure atop her head that adorns her helmet? And the answer to this one, if you were illustrious and zooming in on the Digital Commonwealth image, is, drumroll, a sphinx. You can see that wonderful little sphinx there, who appears in much starker relief in this particular model than the little thing does in reality on the front of our building.
I love it. Reminds
love
me of
it.
the famous pancake on a cat meme, but it's a sphinx on a Minerva.
Sphinx on a Minerva, which is actually a trope. You'll see that actually in other images and depictions of Minerva, the Sphinx. So it's not just here. The grand staircase from 5.3 of the Central Library's McKim building has been photographed throughout its history. In the middle of the 20th century, there was a slight structural addition. What was it? With an eye towards accessibility, it was actually the addition of railings, brass railings throughout the grand staircase. So you can see a photo here and others on Digital Commonwealth from the 1960s. The railings were actually added in the 1950s as part of an accessibility initiative, and they are still standing today. Very well polished, I might add. 5.4, John Singer Sargent's Triumph of Religion mural cycle includes multiple references to celestial figures, including one particular planet depicted in the right corner of a lunette. What is the name of this planet? And for those of you who went through all 8 lunettes that we have in the cycle and found this, it is Saturn. Beautifully rendered in this sort of marine blue-green undertone, a very subtle reference to Saturn and its rings.
Love it.
It's a really stunning panel. 5.5, our last question of the night, and maybe a particularly tricky one. I don't know if people were stumped here. Puvis de Chavannes' movie cycle at the Central Library contains 2 technologies that would have been out of place in the classical period. What are those 2 features? Well, there's one that's relatively overt, and that at left is a telegraph pole with 2 figures traveling over the wires depicting good news, the figure at top, and bad news, the figure at bottom, representing technological advances in communication. And the second one is actually a codex, a bound codex style book, which did not exist in classical times. So while that's not technology in the iPhone way or the Google phone way that we think about it, it is certainly technology nonetheless, and it's certainly made all of our lives a lot better. So a codex book, that's the kicker.
Awesome.
And I'm wondering, actually, how many folks, do we have any perfect scores left?
So we do have 1 perfect score. Before I read the final scores, just wanted to say a couple of things. First, thanks to all Meg, Rachel, and behind the scenes, our cartographic and geographic information librarian, Belle Lipton, who's been scoring away, as well as the staffs of Special Collections and the Map Center who made it possible. Just wanted to say a couple of other things. We still have an exhibition up at the Map Center called Bending Lines, Maps and Data from Distortion to Deception. You can visit it at our website, leventhalmap.org. In lieu of visiting our gallery in person, it has a lot of features that are designed for digital first, and they're a lot of fun to explore, including tours for educators and ways to get involved as teachers or students. And also, Rachel and I will be back on Facebook and YouTube next Tuesday to do East Boston by Map, together with our partners at the East Boston Branch Library. We're going to be doing talk about Atlascope and the Atlascope materials with a focus on East Boston. And that's just the first of a series of community history events that we're going to be doing with the branch libraries that we had started just before COVID hit. We had done 3 that were super fun in the branch libraries in person, and now we're getting back to them as digital events. Thanks to everybody for coming. If you want to hear more about future events, there's a bit.ly link here, or you can always go to leventhalmap.org to sign up to our mailing list, or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or BPL Maps and any of those channels. And of course, Special Collections, keep an eye on the BPL main events calendar for stuff that's going on over there. So, we had a lot of teams that sort of scored 18 and above, which is like pretty amazing, frankly. I don't think I would have scored 18 and above. There were almost a dozen teams that scored 18 and above, so amazing job out there. We had 2 tied runners up for second place that's got 24 points, an almost perfect score, and that was Type 3 Snowplow and Joe Mapo. Congratulations on near perfection. But the 25 score goes to Mario Kartography 64. truly amazing and a little scary. Great job. If you're any of those 3 winning teams, Mario Kartography 64, Type 3 Snowplow, or Joe Mapo, please send us an email at info@leventhalmap.org, and we have stuff for you. For the rest of you, thanks for coming, and you also did amazingly, so we would love to have you next time. We don't have an event on the calendar yet, but we will certainly be doing another one of these later in the fall. So again, keep an eye, subscribe, follow, and like all of our stuff as much as possible. Meg, Rachel, any parting thoughts?
No, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thanks so much for coming and putting up with our Titanic commentary. Coming soon to another round near you.
Yeah, the all Titanic themed trivia will be up next.
Fantastic. Garrett has to watch the film first, though.
No, I'm gonna play the trivia. I'm gonna be a participant, having never watched the films.
Good luck.
We're gonna live stream the Titanic the movie.
Yeah. We're talking about the cartography of Titanic
and the marine architecture.
If only they had a map of that iceberg, right? All right, bye everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Have a great evening. Thanks, guys.
Bye.